African Professionals of Australia Queensland Chapter, in partnership with the Policy Group, would like to thank everyone who came out to support the APA Leadership Breakfast meeting with our honourable guest Dinesh Palipana, who shared his incredible journey and some insights with us. We thank you for your partnership, support and contribution to our success as we look forward to a brighter future. The APA Leadership Series meetings are a forum where industry leaders share their leadership stories in order to inspire and challenge African professionals to strive for excellence and aspiration. They have also been crafted to provide you with opportunities to network with industry leaders and fellow African professionals. Let us take advantage of this opportunity to be inspired and to hear stories from those who have walked the path to success, as they provide us with leadership insights for role modeling and excellence. We are excited to welcome you to the next APA Leadership Breakfast meeting on December the 9th, 2022 at 121 Gotha Street, Fortitude Valley, Queensland, and our guest speaker will be Giri Sivaraman. Registration will be available soon. For more information, go to www.apaau.com, and if you are not already a member, register and become an APA member today.
I just wanted to start by telling you about our organisation, who we are. Before you got the invitation to breakfast, however you got it, who knew about APA? Just hands up. These breakfasts, the intention is for us to have 4 a year, where we bring esteemed leaders focused on a particular topic. So today, our focus is really learning about resilience and how you can overcome anything to achieve whatever it is that you desire, whatever it is you want to achieve from your own personal perspective. And obviously the speaker who's talking on this topic, Dinesh, most of you have seen him on LinkedIn, you've seen what he has had to accomplish. I'm not going to take any thunder away from him. He will come and speak for himself, but an esteemed expert on this topic of resilience.
Thanks so much for having me, Christine. It's a huge pleasure to be here this morning after wrangling the M1. It's great to see Queensland Police here as well. I spent much of last night with your colleagues, not as a prisoner, but as but thank you for your service. This morning I was a little bit sleepy, but I still looked out at the Gold Coast. I saw the sun coming up, I saw the ocean, and I saw this amazing environment that we lived in, and I felt very grateful. And I think that's what energizes me to keep going. It's the gratitude, and it's the peace, and it's this amazing place that I get to live in today. So I'm going to share with you a little bit about the story of how I came to be here and how I came to be sharing this time with you today, and some of the things I learned along the way. I often reflect on, I went to the supermarket on the weekend, and I still marvel at the ability to buy 60 different types of cheese and 20 different types of bread in one place. Because where I grew up, or where I was born at least, many people these days would be lucky enough to find one loaf of bread and definitely not any cheese. I saw so much poverty and violence and suffering when I was growing up. I was born in Sri Lanka in 1984. When I was a kid there, the country was going through so much violence. There was a civil war between 2 different peoples. And in amongst that civil war that lasted nearly 3 decades, there was another war, which was a political war. When I look around the room today, I'm amazed at the diversity and the different types of people that share this. We're sharing meals together this morning, right? And we all have different beliefs, different political leanings, all sorts of different ideas, yet here we are in peace, in this beautiful city on a beautiful day, spending time together. But when I was growing up, that was not the case. And people were divided by their ethnicity, and people were divided by their political beliefs, and hundreds of thousands of people died. I remember once, this is one of the most striking memories that I often share. It was when I was driving around with my mum, and we were driving out of this little town that we lived in. We entered this road, which wasn't a very good road, but as we were driving down, in the distance, I saw some columns of smoke snaking up into the sky. And I don't know if you've ever been in a situation where the atmosphere just felt uneasy, where there was just a bit of fear, where something just didn't feel right. And that's how I felt. I remember just feeling on the edge, and I just remember feeling uneasy. So we kept driving down this road, and we came close to where the smoke was coming from. And I saw piles of tires on the side of the road. And as we got closer again, I saw that they were on fire. And suddenly, we were right near them, like from me to you. And I could see that there were people being burnt alive inside them. When we drove past them again, there were more people, but sadly, they were beheaded, and their heads were lining the road. This was the kind of violence that people grew up in. And I think it gives us perspective, right? Because when are we ever going to see that when we drive down the road? Because we have officers like this keeping us safe, and we live in a very peaceful country. I remember near where we lived, there was a little convenience store run by a family. And one night, the army came for them. They pulled out their young son and shot him in the street. And my mum says that she can still remember the screams of that boy's mother. In amongst the violence, there was so much poverty too. I remember going to this school for a period of time, and it was in a fishing village on the east coast of Sri Lanka, on the west coast. And in that village, a lot of the kids were poor, and many of the kids in my school were poor. They went to houses which didn't have windows or roofs or running water or electricity. And many of them didn't have shoes, and certainly not new shoes if they did. So for a period of time, I was the only kid with new shoes in this school. And they loved my shoes so much, they used to carry me over the water puddles so they wouldn't get dirty in the rain. I have many shoes today, and I appreciate my shoes every day, because I know across the world there are many kids without shoes. It was really hard to get an education as well, because Sri Lanka was so corrupt at the time that most of the principals wanted a bribe before they took me into a school. And my mum didn't want to be a part of that system, but they wouldn't see her. And she sat outside these offices of the principals for days and days and days. And eventually I got into a school, but it was actually a little Islamic school. It was the only school that took me in, even though I wasn't a Muslim. And I went to this school, which was built out of a tiny house for a tiny bit of time, until my parents just thought, we can't do this anymore and we need to leave this country. So because my dad was an engineer, we were able to migrate here under the skilled migration scheme in 1994. So we landed in Sydney on my 10th birthday. I will turn 38 in a couple of weeks. So it's been So it's been 28 years since I've been here, but I remember one of the first things that I noticed is landing at the Kingsford Smith Airport, and we drove out. I was like, wow, these roads don't have potholes, and all the cars are driving in one direction. I was blown away. I was blown away by the order and the beauty and the infrastructure of this place. And Sydney, I always associate Sydney with that memory of first coming to Australia. And then I was able to get into a school, and Mum didn't have to bribe anyone. And in this school were all these different people, different colours of the skin, different ethnicities, different religions, and everyone was going to school together. And again, I was blown away that something could happen in a place like that, because where I grew up, it wasn't the case. So I went to school for a bit of time in Sydney, and then my dad got a job in Byron Bay. So we moved to Byron Bay, and that is the longest I've spent in one place as a child. I should say that I didn't go to school much in Byron Bay, because Byron Bay, particularly at the time, was it was not the most academic place, and there were other things to do. And I rode. So I rode my bike around and I hung out with my friends, and again saw some interesting things. I remember going to a friend's house once, and he just came from a middle class family, like perfectly normal, had the car, had the townhouse. And I remember walking into his house, and it was full of smoke. And his mum was sitting on the couch with this big glass contraption, and she looked very relaxed. And I asked him what she was doing. She's like, oh, that's just Mum smoking her bong. So I think my mum didn't want me to become a herbal doctor, so she decided to move me away from Byron Bay, and we moved to Brisbane. So that's where I finished school. And these days I feel very energized. I feel very purposeful. I was at work last night, and I just felt like that's where I was supposed to be. I wandered around, and I just can't believe that I get to do this for a job every day. And I was looking forward to coming here this morning too, because I think what a privilege it is to come and spend some time with people, and for you to think that I'm worth listening to. So I feel very purposeful today. But those days, I don't think I felt very purposeful, and I didn't know what I was supposed to do. So after I finished school, I remember talking to my mom about what my options were. And she said, why don't you become a lawyer? And maybe it was partly because she had to come and get me from probably where these officers work a couple of times when I was a kid. And she thought at least he'll be able to defend himself if required. So I decided to go to law school. And it was just down the road at QUT in Gardens Point. And today I really appreciate the law for what it is. It's the structure that we live in. It allows us to fight for people. It allows us to make society better. But those days I didn't really understand it, and I didn't really appreciate it, and I didn't really find my purpose in it. So over a period of time, I became depressed. And I think depression is a really important thing for us all to talk about, particularly when we have so many diverse perspectives on it. I think coming from Sri Lanka and coming from that background, I've never really experienced it, or we never really talked about it, but it really snuck up on me. I remember over a matter of weeks to months, I started to feel flat, and then I started to feel down, and then I started to feel anxious all the time. And then I started to have panic attacks. my sleeping patterns changed, and I went into a really, really dark place. I've thought about this a lot over the last week, particularly because last week I spoke to two of my colleagues who are specialists in medicine, and they'd both tried to end their life. Then I went to work the other night and I was talking to a friend, and she told me about a medical student who I remember mentoring to get into medical school, to do the interview and to pass the exam. And she told me he died as well. So I thought about this a lot, and I think it's something that we need to have more conversations about. But I too fell into that place. And I remember today I have a spinal cord injury. And when I first had the spinal cord injury, I woke up in an intensive care unit. I couldn't move my arms. I couldn't speak a full sentence. I was on a ventilator. Even if I wanted to, I couldn't run away. I was physically stuck. I felt like a prisoner. And I felt like a prisoner of my body. But we're 12 years down the track now. And what I can tell you is that it was far worse being a prisoner of my mind than being a prisoner of my body. But in retrospect, it was one of the best things that ever happened to me, because it made me rethink life and what I wanted to do. So I started seeing a doctor, and this doctor helped me come out of the depression. And when I came out, I thought, I just need to adjust the sails a bit, you know. Sometimes life throws us these things, and I think it's a bit of an orange light. And so I thought about what I wanted to do. And I realized that when I came out of the depression, that my entire world had changed. Because suddenly I could feel the sun on my skin. I could see the colors. I remember driving out of my garage, and when I realized that I might be coming out of the depression, because I could see the rich green of the trees, and I could hear the music, and I could taste the food, and suddenly I felt alive again. So my entire world changed. And my mum likes to say that by helping one person, you mightn't change the world, but you'll change the world for them. So I decided that medicine might be a way for me to change worlds, and I decided to become a doctor. I finished law, I got into medical school in 2008, and I knew I found my place in this world. I knew that I found what I was supposed to do, and medicine was amazing. I loved the patients, I loved the material, I loved everything about it. And you know, it's true about changing worlds. The other night I was at work, and there was an elderly lady. She was completely alone. She was living by herself in the house, and she was very sick. So it had become to a point where she needed to go to a nursing home. And I just held her hand for 10 minutes. We talked, she cried, I nearly cried. And I think that's what my job allows me to do. It's not so much the medical stuff, it's not so much the technical stuff, but it's that human-to-human contact and the ability that we have to hopefully make someone actually feel better. So I've loved this job from day one. But you know, I think sometimes we feel like we have everything under control, but nature can take that away within a second. And we all realized that over the last couple of years, right? The whole world changed. And that was it for me too. On the 31st of January, 2010, I was driving down the Gateway, actually not too far from here. It was about 8:30 p.m. It was a rainy day throughout the day. You know, I think about, even though I've learned science, I've learned about evolution, I've learned about the Big Bang, I've learned about all these things, I still sometimes think about destiny. I still sometimes think whether actually there's a purpose for us. Because that night I decided to leave the house at a particular time. I decided to take a particular set of roads, and I took a particular lane on the highway. And on that lane, there was a puddle of water, or it might have been a slick of oil. But as soon as my car hit it, it lost control. The car spun and spun and spun. And it went up an embankment, came back down, and the front of the car smashed onto the road. And then it started flipping nose to tail. It was the most violent experience that I've ever had. The glass was exploding around me, things were flying around the cabin, and I'm flipping and I'm scared. I thought I was going to die. You know, I had a moment of clarity as this accident was happening, because time seemed to slow down. And I thought, there's nothing more I could do about this situation. And it's completely out of my control. But the only thing I can control is the way I feel and the way I view this situation. So I thought about it differently, and I decided to have fun, which was a pretty weird thing to do at the time. And I thought of it as a roller coaster, so I pretended I'm in a roller coaster, and for the last part of the accident, I'm laughing, I'm yelling out, and I'm having a great time. I read about this concept a little while later, and actually it's been pretty good, particularly over the last years, and particularly currently in the frontline services where there's so much pressure and there's a lack of staff and we're working hard. And we get these situations in life, and someone wrote about it like a diamond, because when we get a diamond, it's actually just a dirty rock, and it has no value, and you might even kick it away if you don't understand what it is. But you can take that diamond and you can cut it, and if you cut it just right, you can hold it up in a room like this and the light sparkles through it, and it's beautiful and it's valuable and we all love it. But our experiences in life are like that too. We can take it like a diamond and we can shape it into whatever we want. And we can make it a beautiful thing, or we can leave it as a dirty old rock. So when the car landed, everything was silent, and I tried to get out. That's when I stopped having fun, because I realized that my fingers weren't working anymore and I couldn't grab the door handle. And then I rested my hand down on my leg, but it felt like I didn't have a leg anymore because I couldn't feel it. And I realized, actually, I can't feel anything below my chest. I can't really begin to tell you what that feels like when you know that your life has changed forever, and when you know that things will never be the same again, and when you don't know whether you'll survive. I want to share 2 little ideas with you on that point. You have to hug the people that you love every day. You know, last night I was at work, and numerous times I heard this buzzer go off. And we all know the sound of the buzzer, and we reflexively start walking towards it. Because when it goes off, we know that someone's in trouble and they might need a resuscitation or a trauma. I saw people like that last night, people that had strokes, people that had trauma, and I knew that their lives would never be the same again. And some people don't make it. That day was like that for me too. But you know what the last thing I did standing up before I left the house was? I gave my mum a hug. I stood by the car, gave her a big hug, took a few steps, jumped in, and that was it. It's the very last thing I did standing up. A couple of weeks before the accident too, probably a few weeks before the accident, one of my closest friends, he really kept pestering me to go to Japan with him. And I thought about it a lot, I thought, I need to save money, I need to study, I need to do this, I need to do that. But my friend, I think he cared about me enough to keep hassling me. And so I went to Japan with him, spur of the moment trip. And we had a great time. He's, to his wife's disappointment, he says that it's the greatest trip he's ever had, still. But the reason I tell you that story is I intellectualized that decision so much, but what if someone told me, actually, Dinesh, this is the last time you're going to stand on top of a snowy mountain on a quiet Japanese night and feel a snowflake fall onto your face? I think I would have thought about that decision differently, right? But that was actually the case. That's what happened. We got to seize the day. What we have in front of us, this moment, right now, that's all we have. Tomorrow's not guaranteed. We don't know what happens next. And that gave me strength. I was taken to the hospital in an ambulance. I look up in the ambulance and it's actually a doctor that gave me a lecture. I remember him so well because I thought he was the coolest guy on earth. Because he was an emergency physician and he told us about emergency medicine. And I thought that's what I wanted to do when I finished medical school. And here he was in the ambulance. Maybe destiny, right? So we chat. And he taught me one of the most important things about being a doctor, actually just about being a human being. I don't remember any of the medical things he did for me that night. I don't remember any of the technical stuff. But I remember how he spoke to me, and I remember how he made me feel. What he taught me was that people may not remember what we do for them, but they will always remember how we make them feel. And imagine having an impact like that, where 12 years later, you might be in a room sharing a story about that person with a bunch of people. It's a pretty powerful effect. I ended up in the hospital. I had surgery. I woke up in the intensive care unit on a ventilator. Couldn't lift my arms. I couldn't feel any of my body. And I had to get weaned off the ventilator and began the 8-month journey to learning how to breathe again, to learning how to talk a full sentence, to learning how to sit up, to learning how to use my arms to work a wheelchair and how to get about. It was tough. Every day was hard. Every day was painstaking. Physically, it was so difficult, but socially, it was even more difficult. A lot of my friends walked away. We had to sell the house. My mum and dad split up. My world as I knew it fell apart. After I went home from the hospital, we were broke. And my mum and I went through a period of 4 years where at one time we didn't know where we were going to live the next day. We had no money. I had no shoes. Some days I didn't eat. Some days I was shivering, waiting for someone to come home because my mum had to work to help me get warm again. It was hard. But eventually we clawed our way back. And in 2015, I came back to medical school. It was a tough fight to come back because a lot of people said, how on earth are you going to be a doctor in a wheelchair? How on earth are you going to examine the patients? Will the patients take you seriously? There were so many objections, but I fought and people fought for me. And I started back at medical school and I wanted to win. So I used to wake up every day at about 3 a.m. because it takes a couple of hours to get ready with a spinal cord injury. I can't just jump into the shower and get dressed and run, right? Which is what I used to do. No, it takes a group of people. It takes my mum. These days, I say that actually I don't put my pants on like anyone else, one leg at a time. They get put on for me. But all this takes time. And I used to go to the hospital, do my stuff, and then I studied till about 11 p.m. because that's when the last tram came, and I could see it on my phone. And I timed it just right so I could run to the tram and fall asleep, and then sleep for a few hours, come back and do it again. Which is why today's not too bad. I did that for 2 years, and I graduated with awards. And then I had to fight for my job because they said, how can a doctor with a spinal cord injury work in a hospital? I fought, and people fought for me. Finally, I got a job. I'm in my 6th year as a doctor now. I work in Australia's busiest emergency department. And every day is a blessing. I'm thankful. I'm thankful I have a job. I'm thankful I get to do all these things. And I've had the ability to push the limits. They said that the patients wouldn't take me seriously, but you know what? I've seen thousands of patients now, and they've been amazing. I've had the ability to meet incredible people. I've had the ability to do amazing things. And I realized that the boundaries that we set for ourselves are actually just in our own minds. And they're societal things. A couple of months ago, I started flying a plane. I recently went to visit a friend of mine who owns a space rocket company. And he's promised to put me into space in the next 10 years. I'm going to hold him to that. But the world is unlimited, and we live in this privileged society where we're so lucky to live in peace, to have the opportunities. But you know, a lot of these things are built on ideas and philosophies, right? The way we believe in each other. And I think we have to fight for that. We have to believe in that. And we have to support each other and believe in each other. There's a book called The Happiest Man on Earth. And it's a book about an amazing man who survived the Holocaust and made his way to Australia. I met his family recently. And I said, you know what? I'm sorry, but I want to take that title from your grandfather. Because today I feel like the happiest man on earth. And I'm grateful. And this morning I feel incredibly privileged, and I feel incredibly grateful that you give me your time to listen to me, and you think that story is worthwhile. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Dinesh, for being here, and we're really incredibly honored for you to come and share your story, your experience. One of the things that resonates with me personally about you is the joy that you exude. You know, you walk into a room, you've got this instant happy smile, and that you have no idea how infectious that smile is. So thank you very much for being here. Thank you so much for coming in, and for coming in all the way from the Gold Coast. Can we have another round of applause? We've got a small token of thank you.
Oh, thank you.
So we just want to give you a certificate of just appreciation from our association for taking the time to come out and speak to our members and our guests today. So this is just, get a photo taken with that. And then we've got some copies of your book. You didn't even talk about the fact that you're an author.